hidden runes, and uncertain paths. Emma was flailing her arms wildly, gesturing like a madwoman in front of a fly that buzzed nearby. Her voice carried as she shouted, "Joran! Over here! Look alive, fly boy!" It was enough to grab his attention, and likely anyone else's within earshot. The fly shifted course, relaying her message back to the group. The rest of the group arrived shortly after Emma secured the scene. Naira's sharp intake of breath and Joran's grim expression mirrored the somber atmosphere. Vera's nose wrinkled in disgust, her tail flicking irritably. Rena lingered near the edge of the carnage, her face pale as she took in the gruesome details. Scenes like this weren't uncommon when working under the Accord or venturing beyond the Aeon Spire's protective reach. Normally, such devastation was the work of creatures. Beasts twisted by magic or shadows that thrived in the wilderness. Yet this is different. Deliberate.
"I'll get the city guards,"
Rena said quickly, her voice unsteady. Without waiting for a response, she turned and hurried off, eager to put some distance between herself and the scene. Emma, on the other hand, seemed almost cheerful, or maybe just relieved. She dusted off her hands and gestured to the tied-up sorcerer and his two unconscious buddies. "Thank the Aeon Spire you got my message. I was starting to think I'd have to keep flailing like a lunatic in front of a fly, surrounded by corpses. Not a good look for me, you know?" Naira's eyes narrowed.
What happened here?
Emma's tone turned casual, almost dismissive.
"Oh, it's pretty straightforward. These guys killed those guys, and then tried to kill me. Guess who came out on top?"
Joran, who had been quietly observing the scene, frowned and stepped closer.
"Emma, you're bleeding."
His voice was gentle but firm, the kind of tone that always managed to disarm her. Emma blinked, glancing down at her arm as though she'd only now noticed the blood seeping through the torn fabric.
"Oh, this! It's nothing! Barely a scratch!"
she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. Joran wasn't buying it.
"Sit,"
he said simply, pulling a small vial of healing salve from his belt pouch. His expression was steady, that familiar mix of patience and quiet concern. Emma's heart nearly exploded. He's worried about me. Her face burned as she dropped onto a nearby stone with an exaggerated sigh, suddenly feeling very dramatic.
"Fine, but only because you're so persistent,"
she mumbled, though her voice held none of her usual teasing bite. Joran crouched beside her, carefully uncapping the salve. He worked with practiced ease, dabbing it onto the wound with gentle precision. Emma didn't dare look at him. She stared hard at the ground instead, biting her lip to keep herself from smiling like a complete fool. He's touching my arm. I'm going to die. This is how I go.
"Stop squirming."
Joran said, shaking his head.
"It's not going to sting."
"I'm not squirming."
Emma shot back, though her voice wavered just enough to betray her. She risked a glance at him and found his expression focused, almost brotherly, as though this was the most natural thing in the world. Her heart sank a little even as it soared. Brotherly, of course.
"Done."
Joran said after a moment, standing and capping the vial.
"Next time, be careful, all right? You're not invincible."
Emma stood too quickly, almost tripping over her own feet.
"Me? Careful, always!"
she said, beaming as she flexed her arm with a dramatic flourish.
"Best patch job ever, by the way. You've got skills."
Joran gave her an amused look before stepping back toward the group. Emma watched him go, clutching her arm like it was some kind of sacred relic. He touched my arm and fixed me up. I'm basically his favorite person.
"Are you done swooning?"
Vera's voice broke through her thoughts, sharp and unimpressed. Emma shot her a glare, though her grin refused to fade.
"Mind your own business, lioness!"
Vera huffed, folding her arms as her sharp gaze shifted to the fallen men. The faint crimson embroidery on their cloaks caught her attention, stirring memories she'd rather forget. Her tail flicked irritably.
"Dark societies.
She muttered, her voice low.
Always up to something vile."
The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, the levity Emma brought was replaced by a tense stillness. These weren't just random thugs. They were part of something larger, something dangerous. Joran knelt beside the fallen bodies, examining the symbols on their cloaks with a grim expression.
Murder, extortion, human trafficking. They're behind it all.
And worse.
Vera muttered, her tail lashing.
We should deal with them now.
Not yet.
Naira said firmly.
We need information. Let's see what they know.
Emma crouched in front of the sorcerer, her smile deceptively sweet.
Here's the deal. You're going to help us. If you don't, I'll have to convince you. And trust me, you don't want that.
The sorcerer's eyes darted nervously between Emma and the rest of the group. Finally, he nodded grudgingly. Joran produced a map of Aeternal, spreading it out on the ground. Emma shoved the sorcerer closer, her dagger hovering menacingly near his neck. Mark the locations of the hidden runes, she ordered. The sorcerer hesitated before using his chin to point at several areas on the map. Joran marked them carefully with a piece of charcoal. By the time they were done, the map was littered with marks. Naira's gaze swept over the map, her voice cold and controlled.
This many?
Her eyes narrowed as she pointed to a cluster of marks.
A couple of these are near us, only a few meters apart. How could so many have gone unnoticed?
The sorcerer's voice was shaky, but steady enough to respond.
They're triggered by tapping your shoe 3 times. The hidden runes only started appearing a few days ago. No idea why. That's all I know, I swear.
Without a word, Naira turned and walked away, heading toward the nearest marked location on the map. It was only a few meters from where they stood. She stopped, narrowing her focus as she knelt on the ground. Naira couldn't see or feel the hidden rune, not without knowing exactly where to look and what to search for. Taking a steadying breath, she channeled her magic, letting it flow outward in a precise, controlled pulse. Her ability to detect runes relied on proximity and intent. She had to be close enough and focused entirely on the specific energy signature of hidden runes. Any mistake, and the magic would slip past unnoticed. Moments later, she stood and returned to the group, her expression grim.
The runes are there, faint but active. He's telling the truth.
Emma's cheerful tone returned.
See? Useful after all.
She patted the sorcerer's head mockingly before standing. The group's attention shifted to the map again, unease creeping into their expressions. Rena returned with 2 city guards in tow, both looking uneasy as they took in the scene. One of the guards exchanged a glance with his partner before speaking.
We'll need to notify the Shadow Wardens and the Accord immediately. You'll have to wait here until they arrive and give your statements. Standard procedure.
The mention of the Shadow Wardens sent a ripple of understanding through the group. Unlike the Accord, which handled tasks and quests ranging from monster hunting to general services requested by citizens or organizations, the Shadow Wardens were the enforcers of law and order. They dealt with lawbreakers, criminals, and the likes, capturing or killing as needed. Acting as judge and jury, their authority often extended into the gray areas of justice that others avoided. Where the Accord served the people, the Wardens answered only to their mandate. Vera nodded sharply, her stance firm.
Understood. Let's get this done properly.
Emma groaned, crossing her arms.
Perfect. Sitting around while the city drowns in red tape. Just what I signed up for.
Vera's golden eyes narrowed.
Go ahead, make a mess, but don't expect anyone to clean it up.
Emma scowled but fell silent, though her impatience was obvious as she shifted from foot to foot. The group gave their statements and ensured the sorcerer and his companions were securely in the guard's custody. Only after everything was in order were they free to leave. As soon as they were dismissed, Emma stormed ahead of the group, muttering under her breath,
Finally!
With the map in hand, the group moved to one of the marked locations. The rune was faint but active, just as the sorcerer had described. Nira examined it closely before nodding.
It'll work, but wherever we're going, it's one way. If something goes wrong, there's no coming back.
Emma stepped forward without hesitation, her confidence unshaken.
Then let's make sure nothing goes wrong.
She tapped her shoe 3 times. The rune pulsed with energy, a glowing circle of light folding in on itself. Space seemed to twist and ripple before swallowing her whole. Vera growled as she stepped forward, her claws flexing.
I hate magic like this.
Well, here goes nothing.
Rena muttered, following with clear reluctance. Joran followed silently, his expression grim. Naira brought up the rear, her heart pounding as the rune's magic distorted the space around it. The swirling energy was both exhilarating and unnerving, a reminder of the countless times she had stood on the brink of similar leaps into the unknown. For centuries, she had entered the family race, her determination unwavering despite the crushing weight of failure. There were years when she hadn't even found the starting location, let alone the first trial. In the countless attempts she had made, she had only ever managed to pass the first trial once. Never the second. It was a cruel testament to the race's difficulty, a reminder that even with all her experience and skill, success was no guarantee. Doubt gnawed at her as she stepped forward. What if this leads nowhere? What if we're chasing shadows again? She pushed the thought aside, clinging to the memory of her brother. His voice seemed to echo in her mind, steady and reassuring.
You're stronger than this, Naira. You can do this.
Her gaze flicked briefly to her companions ahead of her, their forms already fading into the swirling light. This group, chaotic and imperfect, felt like the bonds she'd been searching for. They were more than a team. They were her family, however fleeting their time together might be. Her resolve hardened.
I will protect them.
She vowed silently, stepping into the fold of the rune. The sensation of bending space engulfed her, strange and disorienting. Whatever awaited them, she would face it head-on. Not just for herself, but for the ones who now trusted her to lead. The rune's light flickered once, then winked out entirely, leaving the area shrouded in an eerie stillness. The air felt heavier in its absence, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Wherever the group was headed, it would be far from Eternal. And whatever awaited them on the other side was an enigma cloaked in uncertainty. Thank you for joining the journey into the Enchanted Realm. If you loved this story, there's so much more to come. New volumes are on the way, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay updated when the next adventure is released. Don't forget to like, share, and drop a comment below to let me know what you think. Your feedback helps shape the magic. Stay tuned until the end. More stories are waiting to enchant you. You'll see them pop up on the screen. Dive in and let the magic continue.
Wow.